Welcome to the NBDF Wednesday webinar. Looks like we've still got a few people logging in, so we'll just give it a minute or so and then we'll start. Good afternoon, and welcome to the first National Bleeding Disorders Foundation Wednesday webinar of 2026. My name is Fiona Robinson, and I am the series host. In today's webinar, we will learn about NBDF's research grants from idea to impact. We encourage you to ask any questions you may have today. You can ask your question at any time during the webinar using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, or if you're joining us via LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, you can put your questions in the comments and we'll look out for those. And then following our speakers' presentations, we will put your questions to them. Today, we are joined by Louise Baca, a nurse and Senior Director of Oncology at the Maine Medical Center in Portland, Maine, CC Cook, a hematology social worker and health equity specialist at the Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City, Utah, and Dr. Halli Benasutti, the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation, or NBDF, Director of Research Grants. I'd like to thank our three guests for joining us today, and I'll pass things over to Dr. Benasutti now to get us started.
Realized I have to unmute myself before I share my screen, so apologies. All right, Louise and CC, can you give me a thumbs up if that looks good? Just want to make sure. Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right. Thank you all so much for being here today. We super appreciate your attendance, and we're excited to share with you some upcoming funding opportunities that NBDF is offering, as well as the impact of the NBDF funding that has been awarded previously, which is where CC and Louise are going to come in after I share these, our upcoming grant cycle. So as Fiona said, I'm Halli Benasutti. I'm the Director of Research Grants. We, again, encourage you to ask any questions you might have today using the Q&A feature on the Zoom screen, and we're, excited to share our research and opportunities with you. All right, a quick little bit about the National Bleeding Disorders Foundation. NBDF is a nonprofit that is dedicated to finding cures for inheritable blood and bleeding disorders and to addressing and preventing the complications of these disorders through research, education, and advocacy, enabling people and families to thrive. So as the Director of Research Grants, I am part of the research department, and NBDF's research department has some really exciting initiatives that I just want to give a super brief overview of today. These all intersect, and I encourage you to check out our website at bleeding.org/research to learn more. Community Voices in Research, where I will start, is our patient-powered registry. This is a really phenomenal initiative that collects community data so that we can get a comprehensive look at what life is like with a bleeding disorder. So this is a resource as well as a way for people within the community to go and participate in research. You could go sign up today to be a part of Community Voices in Research. You'll be asked to fill out a profile and answer some survey questions. Again, this is a way for us to collect data from the community, which will help direct our own research projects, and will also provide information for other researchers to ensure that we're actually meeting the needs of the community. We have our Grants, Awards, and Fellowships program, which I'll be going over more in depth today. We also host virtual and in-person advisory panels. These are panels of lived experience experts. Lived experience experts are people who live with a bleeding disorder and their family and caregivers who understand what life is like with a bleeding disorder. Lived experience experts, or LEEs, are at the center of everything that we do within the research department. So if you're a LEE, you are a great candidate for community voices in research. Our virtual and in-person advisory panels are panels of LEEs that get together to discuss or advise on specific topics or questions that partners may have, so that we can ensure that we are effectively meeting the community's needs. The Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative is an innovative initiative to elevate LEEs to the roles of consultants, collaborators, and leaders within research. The goal of this initiative is to ensure that LEEs aren't just subjects of research, or participants of research, but that they are actively engaged with and advising research to ensure that research, again, really effectively meets the needs of the community. All right, that was just a very brief overview. We have a lot more information online. Let's get into why we're all here today, which is the grants, awards, and fellowships programs. So NBDF has a really robust history of funding bleeding disorders research. This began with the initiation of our Judith Graham Poole Postdoctoral Research Fellowship, which we started awarding in 1972. Since then, we've instituted a number of other fellowships and awards, which I will be going over in much more detail today. And then after I've gone over our grant cycle and the opportunities that we have available, Louise and Cece are going to share their research. Louise and Cece were both 2024 Excellence Fellowship awardees, and the research that they're sharing today is what was funded by NBDF. And I'm really excited to hear about the impact of that funding and the really cool work that they got to do with that. So, if you're interested in learning more about other research that we've funded over the years, you can go to our website. Under the Research tab on the far left-hand side, you'll see there's a Funded by Foundation link. If you click on that, it will take you to a database that has all of the research, most, if not all, of the research that we have funded over the years, including the awardee, the institution that they were at when they received the award, the project that they pursued, and then a little bio about them. If you're wondering if your research is in alignment with NBDF priorities, this might be a really great place for you to start. The priorities that NBDF is committed to funding are anything that advances discoveries in inheritable blood and bleeding disorders. So it's really important to us that we're stimulating breakthroughs and innovations, investing in developing and advancing multidisciplinary healthcare providers and researchers, and promoting person-centric research, prioritizing equity, diversity, and inclusion principles. Some of the areas of research that we have funded historically include the biological mechanisms of inheritable blood and bleeding disorders and related comorbidities, novel therapies, translational science, clinical advances, quality of care, and health equity, diversity, inclusion, and access to care. Again, if you're not really sure if your research might be in alignment with our priorities, you're always welcome to reach out to us. I also encourage you to go check out the Resources tab under the Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative page on our website. Part of the Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative is that we got the community together over the course of a couple years, and the community actually defined their research priorities for bleeding disorders. And as we are a community-focused and community-based organization, this is a very comprehensive list of the priorities that we would like to fund with our research opportunities. So you can scan this QR code. You can also go to our page to find this resource, and you'll see that it's a very comprehensive, long list of things that are really important to us. So if your research aligns with that, then you might be a really great candidate for one of our awards. A big thank you to our sponsors. For over 50 years, chapters have been helping us support and advance research. We can't thank them enough for all of their hard fundraising work. This work is also supported by endowments from the Hemophilia of Georgia and the Dale Smith Research Endowment. And then we also want to extend a special thanks to our industry partners who support these awards. Sanofi sponsors our Career Development Award, and Takeda sponsors our Clinical Fellowship. So I know I've thrown out a lot of award names here. I'm going to do it one more time before I really dive into what each of these awards are, whether or not you might be eligible, and some of the specifics of them. In 2026, we will be offering the following research funding opportunities. We will be offering 2 Judith Graham Poole postdoctoral research fellowships, 3 excellence fellowships, 1 in each for nursing, physical therapy, and social work, a clinical fellowship that's sponsored by Takeda, and a career development award sponsored by Sanofi. The Judith Graham Poole Postdoctoral Research Fellowship is named after Judith Graham Poole, who's best known for the discovery of cryoprecipitation in the 50s, which is a process for creating concentrated blood clotting factors, which has significantly improved the quality of life for hemophiliacs around the world. This is a $52,000 a year award for 2 years. In order to be eligible for this award, you must be a postdoctoral researcher. And some of the areas that we are interested in funding include the biochemical, genetic, or hematological aspects of bleeding disorders. Again, this is not a comprehensive list. If you'd like to see a more comprehensive list, then again, please check out our community-defined research priorities. The Excellence Fellowships are $15,000 for 12 to 18-month research projects. In order to be eligible for these awards, you must be a nurse, physical therapist, or social worker in a clinical treatment center setting. And again, some of the areas of interest that we would like to fund are improving clinical care and treatment strategies, enhancing psychosocial and community support, and advancing patient and provider education. Sanofi sponsors our Career Development Award. This is $70,000 a year for 3 years. This is a career development award because we are looking to support established investigators at the assistant professor level or above and to help them develop their career as academic researchers in bleeding disorders. And some of the areas of interest are the development of novel technologies and/or therapies to advance the field of bleeding disorders research. Takeda sponsors our clinical fellowship. This is $100,000 a year for 2 years. This is a clinical fellowship, so there is an educational component to it. This is for medical directors and other senior faculty members or administrators that are affiliated with U.S. hemophilia and thrombophilia treatment centers. So the purpose of this award is to increase the number of clinicians that are committed to providing care for people with bleeding disorders. Therefore, this program is designed to provide specifically licensed physicians with hands-on clinical training to prepare them for academic and clinical careers in bleeding disorders research. I will be going over the grant cycle dates that we have today. However, for example, our Takeda clinical fellowship dates have not been posted yet. So if you are interested in receiving updates or notifications when our grant cycle opens, please go to our webpage. There's multiple buttons that you can click to subscribe for notifications. When you click on one of these buttons, it'll take you to this web form. Fill in your information and be sure to select research and medical advancement to be added to the e-blast list for when our awards open. Now let's get into the process of applying for funding from NBDF. The first thing is accessing the application. So if you go to our webpage under Research and Fund Your Research, you can select the opportunity of interest to you to find more information about whatever award you're interested in applying for. About partway down these award pages, you'll see a box like what's here outlined in blue-green. And that will have all of the up-to-date information regarding this award. So when we will start accepting letters of intent, due dates for letters of intent, applications, etc. And then there are a couple of buttons there that have some resources for you. I'm going to skip the letter of intent because we're going to get to that in just a second. We do have a research application process overview document, which gives you an overview of how to apply for funding from NBDF, a lot of the stuff we require, and then kind of what to expect from the application process. And then I believe soon there will also be a button that will have that list of community-defined research priorities, again, helping you to decide if your research is in alignment with our goals. If you click the Submit Your Letter of Intent button, it will bring you to our application platform, which is called Proposal Central. You can create an account here, or if you already have an account, make sure to log in under the Applicant or Awardee tab. Once you've created your account and set up your profile, we will request that you add your ORCID ID to your profile. This helps us to track the impact of the research that we're funding. So that is a requirement that we have for our applications. Once you're in your profile, if you select this Grant Opportunities tab across the top of the page, it will bring you to the database that has all of the available funding opportunities in Proposal Central. I encourage you to scroll through and check these out. As you can see, when I took this screenshot, there were 279 opportunities available for funding. So it's a great place to find any funding opportunity. Specifically for our funding opportunities, though, you'll need to search national bleeding disorders, and it will bring up the opportunities that are available, whether the application date is coming up or the application will open soon or whether it's already open. Select Apply Now next to the opportunity of interest for you, and it will bring you to, for example, the LOI, if we require a letter of intent for that particular application. You can see there's the sections across the left-hand menu, and that will help you to work through your putting together your letter of intent. And then across the top, you have the deadline for that letter of intent in red as a reminder. I'm going to go over our timeline really quick for our postdoctoral fellowship, our career development award, and our excellence fellowships. Letters of intent will open this coming Tuesday, January 20th, and they will be due February 23rd. The LOIs are then reviewed by NBDF, and qualified applicants are invited to submit a full application. The application will be due April 13th, and this requires letters of support from your institution, medical director, and sponsor or mentor. Peer review will occur in April or May of this year. And then award notifications will go out in June. Denied applicants are always provided with constructive feedback. We hope that you'll take that feedback and maybe apply again next year. And then awardees will begin the contracting process. Again, this is not for the Takeda Clinical Fellowship. That is on a different timeline than these other awards. I'm going to quickly go over the application requirements because there's a lot, so I just want to make sure you know what you're getting into. The letter of intent is a page to a page and a half outline of your experience and then the project that you're proposing, so it's quite a bit shorter. But I just want you to know what to expect coming up for the full application. So we require a project title, a summary, abstract, references, timeline, and budget. This is really all like the big project work plan. All the typical materials for these sorts of funding opportunities. IRB and IACUC documentation, letters of support from your institution, medical director, and sponsor or mentor, NIH bio sketches for yourself as well as your sponsor or mentor, the applicant's demographics, education, training, background, HTC affiliation, and funding, and then a signature page that requires signatures from the applicant, mentor, medical director, and institution. A few quick things I just want to go over as you're compiling your application. During the process, please make sure that you are following the guidelines that we have set out. It's really helpful if you put yourself in our shoes and ask questions from our perspective. It can really help you to frame your proposal in a way that actually helps to meet our mission and our needs and our goals, and will make you a much more competitive applicant. And then also, please be sure to give ample time to gather required signatures. You never know who's going to be out of town the week that you have to submit your application and can't get a signature from. So be sure to do that earlier rather than later. As you are putting your project description together, please be sure to clearly describe the specific aims and objectives. Think about what the impact of the project is. What are your deliverables or measurable goals? And how are you going to be able to tell if this project is a success? A couple other quick suggestions. Ask your mentors and peers to review pre-submission. This makes a really big difference for missing information that you might not have thought to include, or can just help make the proposal a lot more comprehensive and well-rounded. And also avoid jargon as much as possible. I know that we all work in very specific niche areas of research, so this can be very difficult to do. And while we will try to get peer reviewers that are aligned with the focus of your proposal, sometimes they end up being a little tangentially aligned. And so the more understandable, broadly understandable it can be, the better it is for the peer reviewers and everyone. Your applications will then undergo a rigorous scientific review process. We will get together a panel of reviewers, and they will review and score the application utilizing the 5 NIH criteria of significance, approach, innovation, investigator, and environment. And then the reviewers make recommendations to NBDF. If you are awarded funding by NBDF, we have award monitoring and ongoing support. We require routine progress reports for ongoing financial support, so we'll touch base with you every 3 to 6 months, including regular financial audits. We feature our awardees on our website, in that database, and then also via announcements. We have lots of speaking opportunities like what Cece and Louise are doing today, and other programming, maybe at our annual Bleeding Disorders Conference, via our virtual research journal club, Wednesday webinars like this webinar right now, on our social media, and more. And then finally, there's lots of opportunities to engage in future NBDF research, such as being a peer reviewer for these grant applications, partnering with us on our Bleeding Disorders Research Collaborative to pursue research projects that center LEEs and pursue the priorities defined by the community for bleeding disorders research. We may also ask for your help in grant revision. So lots of opportunities there, even after your award concludes. One more time, I encourage you to sign up for notifications if you would like to know when our cycles open, and to stay up to date with what we've got going on. So with that, I would like to thank you, and feel free to reach out with questions. I will pass it on to Louise now.
Great. Can you hear me? Thank you for that, Halli. And before I start, I just do really want to thank the NBDF and Halli for this opportunity, and actually for being such an awesome resource, because truly this grant process, or this grant application, was the impetus for me actually bringing my project that I had in my head to fruition. So thank you for that. Next. So I'll just sort of, I won't read the slides, but what I do want to say is the reason why I started this project is because we're the only HTC in the state of Maine. And we've been around for a very long time. And you often wonder if you've captured all the patients in the state of Maine. There's always, nuances where people are moving in and out, or where you have babies being born. But Maine is a very, very rural state, and also access in the northern part of the state is very limited. So that was really kind of the focus, is to first wondering if there were other patients in the northern part of the state, and also to provide education to providers and nurses up in the northern parts of the state, because they may be caring for patients with bleeding disorders. And so we wanted to provide them with a resource. Next. So this is just a little bit of us. This is Maine, and Maine Health is the largest health institution in the state of Maine. The star is where we are located, and that last dot towards the middle of the state is where the last Maine Health entity is. So if you look at that whole state, it's really from the bottom to the top about 6.5 hours, 7-hour drive, which is significant. And so patients we have in the easternmost part of the state have to travel about 4 hours plus 5 hours to come and see us. Next. This is a little bit about our center, which I just shared some information to you, but as far as the driving average hours, 6% of our patients have to drive 3 or more hours, and that goes up to 4 to 5 hours. So if you think about that for a comp visit, that's about 10-hour day, and it's really truly a commitment. Next. So the purpose of this project was a nurse-led project, and it was to identify the patients primarily in the north, and then also to look at establishing satellite clinics for patients that we already have in our program, but also for patients that are in the northern part of the state, should we identify them, and to be able to provide them opportunity to take advantage of our services of the HTC. Obviously, raising awareness about us and also educating nurses and providers who may be caring for patients was another incredibly big concept that we wanted to apply. Providing increased access to care. And really, this was more or less at the end of the day, forging relationships with providers, with the nurse practitioners up in the northern part of the state. Next. So this is another snapshot of our state. We have 16 counties, and there are 7 southern, 5 to 6 northern, and 4 to 5 mid-state. And that's, according to how you sort of cross, put a line across the east to west points of the state. And depending, on how you look at it, is whether you're looking at the northern part of the state or the mid-northern. Next. So prior to applying for this grant, I had already done a little bit of not research, but I had tried to figure out, how am I going to find out that there really are patients up in the northern parts of the state that have bleeding disorders. One would guess that there weren't any severes living up in the northern part of the state, because we would have a pulse on who they were. And so in my journey, I had connected with somebody who recommended an organization called the Maine Health Data Organization. And this is a repository for all payer claims. So it's sort of a rigorous process to apply. It's a government agency, and it's where all of the payer claims sort of drop. And so you apply to gather that not gather, but have access to that information. You meet with individuals at the MHDO who decide or sort of suss out what you're looking for. And so what we were looking for is to take all of our bleeding diagnoses and to cross-reference those against the payer data claim database. And so this report identifies hospitals, clinics, providers, zip codes, counties, where the claims are submitted. And I put this little section down at the bottom there in gold, because it truly was a gold mine for us. There's no patient identifiers in this report that they provide us, but they sort of slice and dice it every which way. And it truly was the basis of how we jumped to this project. Next. This is a little snapshot of that information. And so what I had asked the MHDO is to do a 5-year look back, because I didn't want to have a report that showed a patient who actually lived in the South, visited up north, had a traumatic event, went to the ER or saw a physician, and then they came back down south where they live. So you can see across the 5 years, and I chose the 5 northernmost counties, which are the 5 most north rural counties. And as you can see, over the course of the 5 years, there are indeed patients living up there who have one of the diagnoses that we submitted to the MHDO to run this report. So you can go to the next slide. What I did was I took the top 3 counties, and we cross-referenced the volume of patients with the entities where they may have been seen. So for instance, in that last slide that you saw, it showed that there were, say, 89 patients in one county. That report also drilled down to more specific areas, so zip codes and hospitals, clinics. So we took primary care, hematology, OBGYN, and other clinics that were around the area where these patients seem to be presenting. Once we identified those focused areas, I did a manual search on the web looking for these practices or healthcare facilities, and then did a deeper dive and found the nurse practitioners, because this is a nursing focused project, that were providing care in those areas and at those practices. So all told, it was approximately 70 nurse practitioners who were providing care in 21 practices. And this report, the data that I gleaned from the web were the names of the nurse practitioners, the names of the practices, their addresses, manager names, and phone numbers. So I created a spreadsheet, and this was the basis of where I started outreach. Next. Initially, I mailed 70 packets to 70 nurse practitioners, and some of these nurse practitioners are caring for more than one practice. So up in the northern part of the state, as you can imagine, the resources are not abundant. So for instance, one nurse practitioner might be providing care at 4 or 5 other practices. In this packet that we mailed, we included a who we are information sheet. So that was sort of the demographics of the Maine Health Bleeding Disorders Clinic. We included a letter that talked about the goal of this nursing-focused outreach project. And also we highlighted that the nurse practitioners would be receiving a short survey gauging interest in their willingness to meet and allow us to share information about our program with a token of appreciation. So basically the line was set out that if you respond, then we're going to provide you with a token of appreciation for filling out this survey. I also included a business card, my business card. So once I sent that packet out, 2 weeks later, I followed up with a call to each of the practices that I had sent the packet to. Everybody that answered the phone were not aware that a packet had been received, and neither did I get a call back from any of the NPs or office managers. So I was starting off with a bang. Next. So my second touch point, as I had mentioned in the letter that I had sent originally, was that I was going to send a survey to all of the nurse practitioners. So we created a 10-question survey, and there was a QR code that they could access that survey through. And the questions were around whether they were aware of the Maine Health Bleeding Disorders Program. Did they have any bleeding disorder management knowledge? Were they familiar? Were they interested in a CME program that we would provide them around bleeding disorder management? And were they willing to meet with us at a convenience of their own choosing? So the QR codes were placed on the 21 boxes, and of course we're in Maine, so we're the home of the whoopie pie. So we sent out 21 boxes of whoopie pies to each of these practices. When you opened the box of whoopie pies, then we had a QR code that was right there front and center. But I figured if they also threw the box away, I would include some free-floating QR codes inside. On the back of the box was a short little blurb that said, on behalf of your Maine Health Bleeding Disorder nursing colleagues, please enjoy this token of our appreciation for completing this short care management survey focused on patients living with bleeding disorders in rural Maine. So next slide. That was my whoopie pie box. Next slide. And I received 5 responses. 2 of the sites included their contact information, and 1 site did not, and 2 sites said they were not interested. So at least I know they got them. I will say that 100% that were interested in receiving materials on bleeding disorder management, which was good, and 100% were not familiar with the Maine Health Bleeding Disorders Program. So that's pretty good. So now we had to regroup because our outreach plan was going to be based on the responses that we got from these practices, and we were going to chart out our route according to our responses. Well, without having any responses, quite honestly, except for 2 sites that included their contact, we decided that we would start with those 2 sites because we knew their information, and then we would cold call all the practices. So next slide. So on the right-hand side of this grid, you'll see the original plan was to have 4 week-long trips with 2 members, myself and the data coordinator. It was going to be 4 nights, and we were going to cover about 1,100 miles. After this low response, we revised the plan to 3 trips, It was going to be Monday through Thursday, so 3 nights, and it was going to be 3 team members. At the time that I started putting the project together, the nurse practitioner wasn't going to be available, but she then had availability. So she joined myself and the data coordinator to do our road trips. We ended up changing it to 3 nights versus 4. And because of the fact that we were going to be doing a little backtracking, we ended up planning for 1,200 miles. The other thing that I thought would probably be beneficial is that when you're presenting yourself, perhaps we should have a gift, or sort of a thank you for actually opening the window or opening the door to us. So we created Maine gift baskets, which had lots of little, snacky things and teas and coffees that were specific to Maine. We also created a leave behind packet. Next slide, please. And we decided that our first trip was going to be June 16th through the 19th. So the nice thing is that with these changes, I sent a query to NBDF and asked, if I could make changes. On the right-hand side, you'll see what my original budget was going to be. And on the left-hand side, you'll see that there was an addition to the supplies area, which included our gift baskets and the whoopie pies. So, but the nice thing is that with the change in the personnel and the change in the time we were going to be spending, that was a net zero change. So that worked out well. Next. So the leave behind packets, we included all of the following. They were the director's business card, the NP clinical site lead business card, and then provider materials that we got from the NBDF website, as well as other websites or other resources. And we thought these would be appropriate for various providers. So, some that were appropriate to the obstetrics and gynecology practice, some for the primary care practice, some for the hematology practice. So we included all of that. And regardless of whether they allowed us to come through the front door, we left behind with them a packet with our information and with all of these important sort of fact sheets for them. We also included resources from MASAC. Next. So this is Dana on the left with the moose, and I kind of, how you say deer in the headlights? Well, this was moose in the headlights. When we started our the first couple of practices that we approached, you thought that we were like these big city slickers. We were coming from the south to the north, and I don't know what it was, but they just were not warming up to us. So we sort of regrouped, and after 2 visits, we decided Katerina, as the provider, would start approaching the practices, which in hindsight worked extremely well. So the middle picture, or that picture on the right, is Katerina Funk, one of our providers. I'm on the left, and then Dana, who was integral in really keeping us honest and coordinating the whole trip and the materials, etc. She did a fabulous job, and she is our data coordinator. Next slide. So we visited 27 practices, and these were the types of practices that we saw. We offered the gift baskets because some practices were not allowed to take them, which turned out okay because we had a couple of practices that we stumbled upon that were not on our original list. We made 21 connections, which means we actually got contact names and email addresses so that we could follow up with them after the fact. And we truly had some terrific successes on our first outreach trip. So, and incredibly, the Airbnb that we were staying at was a nurse practitioner of one of the sites that we had visited. So he was also key. 4 or 5 sites welcomed us and actually let us through the door and engaged with us, listening to our spiel. Most that were interested had 5 to 6 affiliated offices, which really was great. And they had also shared with us that they had numerous patients that they were caring for with bleeding disorders. The day after we returned back from our first outreach trip, I had a request to meet from one of the practices for the nurse practitioners to meet with their providers. And also when we returned on that Friday, we received 2 requests to provide CME education luncheons in the fall, which I was thrilled about. So to me, I could end right here and say that it was very successful. Next slide. Also, while we were doing this, we obviously wanted to provide them sort of with a takeaway, and that was offering a 1.0 CME or CNE. So we partnered with a Medco, which they were so easy and wonderful to work with. And so we were able to get an agreement for a live presentation for CME and CNEs, and also enduring. So after we did our first presentation, we recorded it. Okay, great. I'm almost done. And then we have an enduring presentation. So those that weren't at the luncheons that we attended, we could send them the link and they could also view it and also get a CME or CNE. Next. Our second outreach trip was scheduled for September 8th to 11th. And in the interim, we had sent off thank you cards. We were able to offer these luncheons. There are 2 of them that week, and they were phenomenal. There were 20 in the first session, and there were, I think, 12 in the next session, and everybody was very engaged and thrilled with the presentation. Next. The outreach trip that we had in the fall, this was a summary that I just gave, and I think we can move to the next one. And so the survey that was sent to all the participants was at the end of the actual presentations. 100% said that they got benefit from the increased knowledge. 2 to 3 practices were interested in partnering with us. And we have our first pilot outreach clinic scheduled in the spring. So that was a win-win for us. And then our goal for the future is that we'll offer quarterly comprehensive visits. But I think the biggest thing is that we forged relationships with these providers in, at least 5 to 6 practices. And because it's up north and very rural, everybody knows everybody. So that I think that that's going to be a benefit to us. Our next phase of this is to outreach to our main Amish and Native American population, which will be a little more challenging. Next. I just want to thank the following for helping me during this process. They were integral in guiding me in a direction or, beneficial information. And so thank you. And I thank the NBDF for allowing me to do this research under your guidance. It was terrific. And for all of you who are out there thinking about doing this application, the portal that you work in is just wonderful, easy to navigate, and it just guides you on all of the things and the pieces that you need to put together to actually come up with a really solid proposal and project. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Louise. That was awesome. And thanks, Halli, for introducing us. So I've been working on this project for a little over a year, and there's a phase that we're about to go into, but yeah, I'm excited to talk about it today. So go ahead and go to the next slide. I think just being a social worker, like getting to interact with patients in our heme-gyn combined clinic, I just saw like what a positive impact that kind of like specialized care had on our population. Like we've gotten such great feedback about being able to meet with the hematologist and the gynecologist and really get like specialized care for heavy menstrual bleeding and bleeding disorders. But we also hear so much about how underrepresented women and girls are who have bleeding disorders, just in large part because many women and girls, they just simply don't know they have one. Like they have heavy menstrual bleeding, they have all of these accompanying symptoms, but they never seek care for it because they're afraid to bring it up with their doctor. They're not asked about it. They don't receive education, or the education that they do receive is not really factual. So I really wanted to see what we could do about kind of bridging some of those gaps in care in Utah. Okay, next slide. And again, like as a social worker, I'm always looking at what are the impacts of like these health conditions on our patient population. And obviously we know largely about the physical symptoms. Having heavy menstrual bleeding can put you at higher risk for iron deficiency anemia, which can cause a number of different symptoms: fatigue, brain fog, muscle weakness, hair loss, sleep issues, and even beyond that, there's the mental health impact as well. So there's a lot of evidence that suggests that women and girls with heavy menstrual bleeding are at increased risk for anxiety and depression. In our clinic population, we definitely see girls who are, I work in a pediatric clinic, so a lot of girls who are in school having to miss a lot of school, having like accidents, bleeding through their clothes during school, having to miss out on different social aspects because of these symptoms. And these are kids who are already receiving care. So there's definitely people out there who haven't received care, and are kind of just going through life and continuing to suffer. Okay, next slide. So my project, again, we've been working on it for a little over a year now, but its primary purpose is to just kind of better understand some of the gaps that exist in the state of Utah for individuals with heavy or prolonged menstrual bleeding, and then we want to provide education to primary care providers as well. So it's kind of a two-part project. The first part being the needs assessment, where we just got a general idea among the population of heme-gyn patients that we have, to just like get a better idea of their overall experience with getting diagnosed, treated, what they thought went well, what they wish would have been better, just to get an overall idea of how their experience was. And then we use a lot of that to inform an educational curriculum, which we're going to meet with primary care providers throughout the state of Utah to just give education about like screening, diagnosis, treatment, the referral process for heavy menstrual bleeding and underlying bleeding disorders as well. So we will start that soon. We have a couple of appointments set up for different physicians to meet with, so that's exciting. Okay, next slide. Okay, primary goals, the top three, definitely increasing provider knowledge, I think, is the biggest one. I think that'll make the biggest impact in terms of just spreading awareness about bleeding disorders, increasing the amount of girls who are seen for heavy menstrual bleeding, hopefully increasing like the amount of girls who are diagnosed with a bleeding disorder. And we also want to reduce the number of women with undiagnosed bleeding disorders, which goes along with the first goal. And then just overall increasing the quality of life for women with heavy menstrual bleeding and bleeding disorders. And we're also, we're also tracking the number of heme-gyn referrals that we get. So we've been tracking that since like 2021, which is when we started offering the clinic in our HTC. So we'd like to see that number increase as well. Now, next slide. Thanks. So this is for the first part, the needs assessment. This is just some demographic information. We were able to survey kids within our heme-gyn population. So again, a pediatric population, ages 13 to 18. And most of the participants reported either having a bleeding disorder or a family member with a bleeding disorder, the most common being von Willebrand-Disease, which isn't surprising. And 83% self-identified as having heavy or abnormal periods, which is majority of the people that we surveyed. And an even higher percentage actually met the diagnosis criteria, which was interesting, that less people reported having bleeding disorders than actually like met the criteria for heavy periods. And then all of our patients were compensated with a gift card. Next slide. So the two big takeaways that I just want to touch on really quick was just have you ever received education about what a heavy or abnormal period is? I was pretty happy to see that 75% said yes, they had received education before. I think this is definitely higher than we would see in the general population, just because this is already a specialized population. They've already seen like specialized care for heavy menstrual bleeding. So it's not surprising that that number is a little bit higher. But where they received the education from, only about 60% said that they received education from a doctor, which I was hoping would be a little bit higher. But again, that's why we're doing this project. We want to increase that number. And a smaller number said that they had received education from family and friends. Yeah, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. And I won't read all of these, but these are just some quotes that we received also from the kids who took our survey. So when did people realize that they had heavy periods? People reported like, well, their mom had heavy bleeding, so I thought it was normal. But then in talking to my friends, like I realized it's actually way heavier than I thought. Someone had an extremely heavy and painful period for 9 weeks. They tried a couple different things that didn't work, so they realized they had to get a more specialized care. Someone roughed it out for a year before they got treated, which is a pretty common experience. Next slide. And if you receive treatment for your periods, describe your experience. Overall, this feedback was really positive, which again, I was happy to see. And I think this is just a testament to our Heme-Gyn clinic and having providers that genuinely care and have knowledge and are willing to try different things and take the time to educate their patients. So it was really great to see what a positive experience with the doctor, like how much of a difference that makes in people's experience. Next slide. Okay, so for our next portion of the project is going to be physician education. So I think, again, like one of the main takeaways we got from the needs assessment was that healthcare providers are the primary way that people who menstruate receive education. It's, you know, very few are getting like reliable factual information from family and friends. And it is, at least in the state of Utah, people aren't receiving any kind of heavy menstrual bleeding education in the school setting. So the doctors are really like the primary avenue for receiving education for this. So it's really critical for primary care providers to screen every menstruating individual for heavy menstrual bleeding, and then understanding like the diagnosis and treatment process, and then when to refer to either a hematologist or a gynecologist. So our priority education topics are going to be just about like general heavy menstrual bleeding, how to educate patients using like more specific language in a way that they can understand. So I don't know if anyone's heard of the 7-2-1 rule, but I think that's a really easy way to educate patients about what's a normal versus abnormal period, because a lot of people just don't know. So it's 7 days of bleeding or more, having to change a pad or tampon every 2 hours or less, and then passing a blood clot that's more than 1 inch in size. And then our next topic is just bleeding disorders, so like the link between heavy menstrual bleeding and underlying bleeding disorders. Again, the referral process, when to refer out to a specialized provider, and then different diagnostic tests when someone does screen positive for heavy menstrual bleeding. Next slide. So these are just a couple of things that we'll be giving to providers when we speak to them. This one is just a overall like research 1-pager, just to kind of summarize like what my research is about. On the right, you'll see the Philips screening tool, which is kind of the gold standard in terms of effectiveness and like ease of use in the office setting. So we're going to really encourage the providers to screen all of our patients, or all of their patients. Okay, next slide. I'm being mindful of time. I see the clock at the bottom, so I'll go quickly through these last couple. And then these are a couple more handouts that I created as well. On the left is just the referral process. So I worked with Dr. Mesnerich, who's our HCC medical director, to kind of figure out like when is it appropriate to refer to heme-gyne? Like what's the process after a patient has been screened? So it just goes over like what the labs should be, what to do if the labs are abnormal, and then when else to refer. And then on the right, there's just more of like a general handout that kind of goes over everything that we're going to speak to the providers about, and hopefully they can have these to kind of have on hand in the future to like refer back to. Next slide. Okay, and like I mentioned earlier that there were no respondents in our surveys who said that they'd received education in the school setting, which I thought was very surprising. So I would love to expand this project and do some like school-based education with actual kids, just to like further that education, really provide just reliable information about what abnormal periods are. And I think that's it. Oh, the grant impact. So yeah, I just wanted to thank NBDF for making this possible. I know as a social worker, there's really not that many research opportunities out there that are funded. After I received this grant, I looked into a couple of other opportunities, and I really didn't find any that were as supportive as this one. So it really is a unique opportunity. So if there's any social workers out there that are looking to do research, I think like this experience has been so great. Like it really wouldn't have been possible without this funding. So yeah, I would definitely recommend applying for a grant if you have any kind of interest in research. Okay, I think that's it.
Super. That's great. Thank you so much, Cece, Louise, and Dr. Benasutti. It's been really great to hear your expertise around these research funds, sort of from both sides, from the administration and from the practical use. We've got just a few minutes for questions, and we've had a couple of questions come in. So I will just try and bring a couple of quick questions to you. And I would just like to let you know that if there are questions we can't get to, or if you have questions you think of later, you can reach out at, we have an email address that is research@bleeding.org. So you can always send your questions that way directly. And also, if you go to the Bleeding Disorders Conference that NBDF has every year, that's a great time also to speak to NBDF and all of the different people there who have experience and expertise around these grants. So very quickly, I will just go to one that came from actually somebody joining us via Facebook, and they were asking whether HPS, which I'll admit I had to look up, is Hermansky-Pudlak syndrome, whether this would be eligible for NBDF funding. And I'll put that to you, Halli.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, HPS as a platelet disorder would be eligible for funding. I would like to note that we do not fund foundations, we fund individual researchers. So if you are a researcher looking for funding for HPS, fantastic. If you're a foundation, you will need a specific researcher to apply.
Super, thank you. And this last question, we've only got a minute left, and I know it might take more than a minute to answer, but I think it's an important one because I think it might be on quite a few people's minds, is whether the cuts that the current administration is making is going to have an impact on these funds and these opportunities.
A great question. For this coming year, 2026, no. Our funding is already secured for this year for these opportunities. So we will be offering everything that I talked about today. And we really hope that we are going to be able to continue to offer these opportunities. As I said earlier, a lot of our sponsors are really the community, but also we have some endowments, partners through our national chapters, and then our industry sponsors. So really it's kind of up to them, but we are so grateful for their continued sponsorship. These opportunities are so important, and we really look forward to receiving your applications.
Great. Thank you. And I was going to ask Louise and Cece about the importance of funding research by social workers and nurses, but I think you really spoke to that. So I appreciate you including that in your presentations. And as we have hit 3 o'clock, I'm afraid we've come to the end of our Q&A. I know we've got other potential questions. Do send your questions to research@bleeding.org. Halli and her team are there to help you make your application and make it really successful. And also, this recorded webinar will be available shortly on bleeding.org. So you can go back and watch it again. It'll be in the events tab. And we'll also send around an email in a little while with a summary and also a link to go back and watch again. So you get lots of chances to get this information. Please do come back in 2 weeks' time to join us for our next Wednesday webinar. We'll be talking about advancing hemophilia A and B care. An expert presents a subcutaneous injection therapy. And very exciting, this Sanofi-sponsored webinar will be presented in Spanish. So thank you so much for joining us this week, and I look forward to seeing you again on January 28th.